Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Now when it comes to Age of Empires 2, there are some units that benefit way more from upgrades than other units. In fact, some units are really strong with absolutely no upgrades at all. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about the top 5 strongest units without requiring a single upgrade. Now obviously these units can get better if you upgrade them, however they come out the gate extremely powerful and can wreak havoc on your opponent immediately. And so they are quite a solid option, especially when you get up to the next age faster than your opponent and have that time window where any damage is absolutely crucial. Alright, without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the top 5 strongest units with no upgrades. Before I show you guys the list though, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick shout out to my gameplay channel on YouTube. It's called Hera Gameplay. I link it in the description of every video. We post a top tier AoE2 1v1 there every single day. No clickbait. You're getting exactly what the video title says. And if you're into high level AoE2 gameplay, definitely check that out. Alright, let's go ahead and hop into the list. Alright, starting off at number 5, this unit is absolutely insane stat-wise. It's also a cavalry unit, so it has the natural benefits of a lot of mobility, really strong stats, and this unit is of course the lightest. Now the lightest is absolutely insane. It has 13 base damage, just 3 more than the knight, and it also has a relatively cheap gold cost at only 50 gold a piece. This unit can also scale pretty well through Lithuanian relics, which are technically not upgrades, and so the lightest can theoretically get 13 plus 4 damage, 17 damage with absolutely no upgrades. However, that's a little cheesy, so for this video I'll only consider the 13 base damage, and so of course you have 100 HP, 13 base damage, and although you lack some armor compared to a knight, it's still such a strong unit when it hits your opponent and starts attacking, so it's just way too powerful raw stat wise, and the little armor you're missing out on doesn't really play a big factor, especially if you're the guy with the momentum. And so for me, at number 5, the lightest comes out of the gate extremely powerful, and especially on maps like Nomad where you can get up the castle stage faster, drop a castle on your opponent's face, and get a few lightest on the field, they can be absolutely deadly, and I've lost countless games to Mr. Yo as he just brings out lightest and raids me to death. Alright, moving on to number 4, it's going to be a siege unit. However, it's a siege unit that does extremely well at all points of the castle age, and it's also really good on both defense and offense. And this unit is of course the Mangonel. Now, as I said earlier, the Mangonel is great defensively and also offensively, and the thing I like the most about it is that it's used to push not only units but also buildings. It does pretty good against both, and so it's a very flexible, very multi-purpose unit, and I'd even argue it has some purpose in Imperial Age with no upgrades at all. You don't even have to get the honored attack because it does fairly well against elite skirm, because even if they get bracer and chemistry, elite skirm has 7 damage, Mangonel has 6 pierce armor, so your Mangonel is going to be only taking 1 damage per skirm volley or per skirm hit, and so it's quite deadly even against Imperial Age skirmishers. You're able to push them away or force them to micro well, or else they'll lose a bunch of their Imperial units to your castle age leftover siege. And now come to think about it, you can't even get a single upgrade on Mangonels in castle age, and we see this unit pretty much everywhere in castle. It's in almost every game. It's a crucial part of any siege push, and so for me the Mangonel gets an easy spot on the list on being a really powerful unit without requiring any upgrades at all. A really strong siege unit, very flexible, solid option to go for. Moving on to number 3, I've got only one siege unit that trumps the Mangonel, and that is going to be the Bombard Cannon. Now, though the Bombard Cannon can benefit from a few technologies like siege engineers, like maybe the Hufnitze if you're the Bohemians, I think that the raw Bombard Cannon is such a strong unit. Think about it this way, if there's ever a Treb war, the first guy to get chemistry is going to be able to use a Bombard Cannon, kill the enemy Trebs, and then also push the buildings with the cannon itself. The Bombard Cannon is much more multi-use comparing it to a Trebuchet as well. The Trebuchet is usually only good against buildings, and it's also quite clunky to use. You have to pack and unpack it, whereas the Bomber Cannon is really smooth. Although it's slow, you can always move it, shoot, micro it away. It's good against units, it's good against buildings, and it's good against other siege weapons. This unit has very little downside, and although it's the most expensive unit in the game, it has so much value, and it requires very little upgrades to make do, and in fact, even with no upgrades, it ends up being an extremely strong option. Technically, you do need chemistry for it, but for the purpose of this video, I'm not counting that as an upgrade needed for the cannon. All right, moving on to number 2. I think I might surprise a lot of you guys with my number 2 pick. Not because you don't expect it to be on the list, but probably because you expect it to be at number 1. And at number 2, I've got the Conquistador. Now, it might be obvious what's at number 1 now, so comment down below if you can actually guess what's at number 1. I want to see if you guys can guess it or not. But either way, at number 2, we've got the Conquistador. And for me, the Conquistador could be the next candidate for number 1. It's very close, in fact. However, the recent nerf to take away a pierce armor really hurts the Conquistador. It makes it a little bit more fragile to skirms and crossbows, and also to TC and castle fire. And for me, 55 HP with only 1 pierce armor is a little too squishy. And so I still think the Conquistador is a powerhouse of a unit, and the Spanish gotten better as a civilization from the recent patch, but just on its own with no upgrades, it just doesn't pack as much of a punch anymore. That being said, if you pick up bloodlines and you pick up husbandry and you also get some pierce armor on, or some archer armor in general on the Conquistador, it ends up being an absolute powerhouse in Castle Age. But right from the get-go, it's still really strong. It's good against cavalry, it's good against archers and skirms in low number. It's also really good at raiding and picking off vills. However, it just doesn't quite do it compared to the number 1, and so for that reason, Conquistador gets a number 2 spot on the list, and it's still a really strong unit that requires no upgrades. Alright, before I show you guys number 1, I have to talk about some honorable mentions here. Some really strong units that just didn't quite make the list. Starting off with the Monk. I thought about putting the Monk somewhere on the list. However, the Monk with no upgrades isn't really that strong. I mean, it's really good in early Castle Age, but you kind of need Sanctity and block printing and Redemption for the Monk to be really scary after like early Castle. And so I still think the Monk is an insane unit, even with no upgrades in early Castle. It does a lot. It converts, heals, picks up relics. It's just a core part of a composition in a lot of cases. But like I said, I think without upgrades, its use is kind of limited, and it definitely falls off rather quickly. Another 2 unique units on the honorable mention list is going to be the Organ Gun and the Arambai. There's nothing wrong with these units at all. It's just that the Organ Gun got nerfed recently, so they're not as strong against mangonels. And then the Arambai in general, I feel like needs upgrades, and it needs a pretty big mass to get rolling. It also kind of needs ballistics to be accurate in the mid game when you have a bunch of them. And so I just feel like it's just not as strong from the get-go as some of the other units on this list. And so for both of these units, they're definitely really good unique units, just not quite as strong as some of the other ones that I have. Alright, and now finally the moment we've all been waiting for, the number 1, the strongest unit with no upgrades in Age of Empires 2. It's gonna be the Janissary. The Janissary is an absolute mad lad. This guy is so strong and so hard to deal with. It's only 44 HP, but it has 8 range and 17 damage. That is just incredibly strong raw stats for the units, and I think in particular the thing that makes it the hardest to stop is that 8 range. Monks only have +1 range over it at 9 range. Archers and skirms are actually getting outranged by the Janissary. Mangonels and scorpions are getting outranged by the Janissary. And so as you can see, the Janissary almost has like no counter. If you're playing one-on-one, Janissary will always have the upper hand. And in low numbers, 5 to 10, Janissary is going to be able to one-shot pretty much all of your units, and you're not going to really get your hands on that unit because it has such long range. It does extremely well against cavalry because of its high damage. It does extremely well against range units because of its high range. The Janissary is just such a strong unit, and especially on maps like Arena, maps like Nomad, where you can get a castle rather early and your opponents might not have the tools to defend or the time to defend against you, you can just absolutely steamroll bases. And in my opinion, Janissary Mangonel is one of those compositions that feels like an Imperial Age composition. And how does it get that feeling? It uses 2 units from this list of strongest units with no upgrades, Janissary plus the Mangonel, in combination to just become an absolute powerhouse in the Castle Age. And the reason it's so strong is because other units need upgrades to compete with these units that require no upgrades. So you're much stronger, much earlier, and even when they do get their upgrades, your units are still really strong and hold their own until they really master their counter unit. And so in my opinion, the Janissary is undisputed best unique unit or best unit in the game that requires no upgrades to get that raw power. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching it. It was a nice little list I kind of thought of randomly, and I honestly believe that it's important to have this knowledge as well when you're playing, to understand the kind of threats that your opponent can go for, or maybe the threats that you can go for if you're playing any one of these civilizations, or if you have the tools to make mangonels or bomber cannons or any other unit that I mentioned on the list. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace, stay safe.